Hello there, and welcome back to Little Bear Games. I'm Josh.
I'm Andy.
And today we are exceptionally excited. We've got a real treat for you lined up in today's episode, as this is our first, I suppose, formal review, Andy. We've never really done like a proper review-centered episode before.
No, I agree. This is certainly our first loosely formal review. We're going to review a game, but we're going to take our usual casual approach. So there's probably going to be some inaccuracies in something. You know, we might get French in Castle wrong, or or something to that extent. But no, we're going to review a game that was kindly given to us from Hatchet Games. If you want to add a little bit about that, because it was you that contacted them, and maybe just talk about the belief in the mission that we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, so a little while ago, probably a couple of months ago, I decided to send out a few kind of, I suppose, lightly testing the water emails to several kind of board game companies, publishers, distributors, what have you, just to see if they'd be interested in working with us on the podcast, and kind of stressing, I suppose the twofold element of our kind of mission, if you will, the raising money for charity, which we talk about regularly on here, but Children's Hospice Southwest and the Grand Appeal for Bristol Children's Hospital. And also just, I suppose, the kind of mission for Andy and I to make this more of a full-time thing, more of a career, if you will. And we had a few very nice replies from people, but it was very much off the kind of, you're still growing, so come back to us in a few months or a bit later on, that kind of thing, but it's still very nice and polite. Or we didn't hear back at all. But then I was driving along, I can't remember where we were going. I was taking you somewhere. It might have just been to Lidl or something.
We were together, yeah.
Lidl, please sponsor us. And I'll get that in. That's it. That's done now. And you started freaking out in the passenger seat next to me. And I thought something awful had happened, because I was driving along and you just started screaming and going, oh, mate. Oh, mate. And so Andy and I have a joint kind of email address for the podcast, so we can both see what's kind of going in and out in it for the most part. And we had a very kind email come back to us from Hatchet Board Games UK. And one of the kind people who worked there, I'm not going to name them because they've not mentioned that at all, and I don't think that's necessarily appropriate. But
shout out to you. Hi.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. They came back to me and said, we've read your email. We've heard your story about kind of indie and, the cause you're kind of looking at raising money for. And yeah, of course, we'll ship you some games for you to review.
So yeah, with that said, why don't we get into the review?
Yeah, so we're going to be reviewing Cartaventura D-Day today. And I was really, really excited when this first popped up in that email from Hatchet, because it was described as kind of a, I suppose, narrative-driven card game that focused mainly on the life of a young French girl living in occupied Normandy, kind of, I suppose, around the time of the landings, and sort of focused on the struggles a young woman would face in that time and kind of what obstacles she'd come across and navigating those as you go. But I just found it really weird because there aren't many games that I can think of, except with maybe something like The Grizzled, that are set in sort of World War II era Europe.
Yeah.
And aren't literally a war game. So
where
something
you're playing
like
a tank or an infantry member.
Like Memoir, Undaunted, Bolt Action, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Unlike yourself, where you were quite excited, I was a bit of, oh, what's this? I've never seen this type of game before. I mean, I know what sort of text-based adventures are, and it feels like a text-based adventure. Where it did when I looked at it. It plays very, very differently to a text-based adventure, but you are making decisions as you go along. We'll make our best effort here not to ruin any of this for you guys. There are multiple endings and multiple ways to play the game. We have, as it stands, played through one sitting of the game.
Yeah.
I won't go into how well it did, but let's just say for those that we're going to play again. For those that aren't going to sit through this whole podcast review, I hope you are. But early spoiler, we're definitely going to play this game again.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe there's 5 endings in total.
Okay.
That you can get, and the game as Andy's kind of alluded to, it plays very much like a choose your own adventure story, kind of like the old Fighting Fantasy game books. They come to mind first and foremost in my head. But yeah, it's really good fun. There's no instructions in the game, really. You just get a kind of deck of cards. And these cards, there's two cards on top that give you very loose instructions. They basically say kind of, if you're ready, turn this card over and keep going.
Yeah.
And that's about it. You literally just start flipping these cards over and reading them, and it just tells you what to do as you go.
I was going to say, because you read the first two cards and there's a little bit of, shall we say, board game, and I'm saying this in quotation marks for those that, well, we don't do it on video. You loosely set up the first couple of cards, and I have to say immediately, I was very excited. I don't think I'll be giving too much away, but as you turn these cards over, you're starting with a little village, essentially, or that you're in a village. And it certainly helped me start to put myself in the shoes of the character we were playing.
Yeah.
Certainly, I've got to be very careful. I don't want to give anything away, really, because I wouldn't want to spoil this experience for anybody else. But I will say, tread lightly that, everybody's different in terms of what they think is a spoiler. So the mere mention of this being a village might spoil it for some people.
Well, I think, to be entirely fair, there's not really any variation that can happen from the very start. Essentially, you read a couple of cards that gives you some like backstory, and then you lay out a few cards that form the kind of starting village.
Yes.
And from there, you can kind of branch off and do different activities in the village.
Immediate choices to make, haven't you?
Yeah, so there's kind of 3 or 4 different options of places to go, people to interact with, stuff to do. When you choose to go down one of those paths, you'll turn over other cards and parts of the map will be replaced. You may pick up certain objects that then go into a kind of player-held inventory, and they'll help with other situations you come across later, where it's like, if you have X item, then turn over this card. If you don't, turn over this other card.
And you use the word help there, it might hinder also, right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Or that's... Not that I think we, in our playthrough, necessarily got anything that hindered, but it certainly felt like some things could hinder.
Yeah, well, we had something where we had got rid of an item, and then we came across a situation later where we believe anyway that it would have worked out quite badly for us if we'd still had it on us.
Possibly. We're having a bit of a stab in the dark at that, but it certainly felt that way. So yeah, this narrative, sort of story-driven gameplay. You and I were getting really, really excited with every turn of a card, read of a story or of a situation. If we felt like we made the right decision, we would kind of high five each other and hell yeah, just really, really fun to get into.
Yeah, and it's very interesting. In terms of its core gameplay, it is literally just either draw a card and read the card and then resolve it, maybe put a card down and add to the map, maybe flip a map card over onto its other side, maybe do something else entirely.
Yeah.
So it's a very loose one. It basically revolves around you reading the cards, and that's it, essentially.
And so when you say that, let's emphasize the reading the card part, because you and I, we can't necessarily point the finger at who did it. It was probably me, but
both of us.
Didn't read one of the cards and end up missing. We ended up picking up a card that we should have picked up a card and then hitting a brick wall, as in we had nowhere to go with the game.
Yeah, we had to basically do a light restart very early on into our first playthrough, just because we'd hit a dead end and there was literally nowhere else to go or anything to do.
And that was totally our fault.
Yeah, it was. It was totally our fault. It was just us. It was at the bottom of the card. It said draw this card and turn this one over.
Yes.
And I think we just missed the draw of the other one and we just turned the one over.
Yeah,
kind of
exactly.
thing.
So do like the core mechanic is to read the card. Just make sure you're doing that.
Reading the card explains the card.
Yes,
as the,
exactly.
professor says.
Yeah.
No, it's really interesting. So you get the kind of reading the card element, and then there's the decision making. So the game can be played as a solo experience, but it's also playable for up to 6 players on the box. Realistically, you could play it with as many as you like.
Yes.
It would just probably not go as well.
Yeah, too many cooks. Yeah. I wonder, it was just the two of us making decisions, and we kind of just took it in turns making decisions or trying to be logical and sell the decision to the other person, didn't we? And I quite liked that about it.
Yeah, we just kind of generally went back and forth, but then if one of us felt something was definitely more logical than something else, we'd pipe up with it.
Yeah.
And once or twice, us trying to be logical didn't work out, and other times it really did.
Yes.
And it felt very fair, all of it. The decisions felt weighty, and there was one decision, Andy talks about us getting excited, where we were like doing the Ali G kind of like finger booyakasha thing and like jumping up and down, like looking at each other, getting all like veiny and fist pumped and stuff, because we'd made a really good decision. And it was because there was like a twist on the moral choice. And it was such a well-written twist. It was absolutely brilliant. And we were like, yeah, we've been rewarded for this. This is great.
100%. And I think I need to add to that it felt, I'm not a historian here, but it felt historically accurate to some extent. And I don't mean that this is a true story. I just meant that the cards you were flipping over and the situations that were happening, we were discussing decisions before we would make them. And the little knowledge that I have on World War II with things like Alan Turing, the Enigma machine and things like that, MI6 and all that kind of like plays into it. And just having that little bit of knowledge was kind of making my decision or the choices I was trying to make in the game a little bit more interesting, because I was thinking back to, I know this about the war, and if they would have done this, this could have happened. And I'm not saying that necessarily meant that I made the right decision, but it was just very cool that it felt like it had been researched and there was some historical accuracy to it.
Yeah, you felt very validated by stuff, but that's not to say you need to have GCSE history like enjoy it or do well or anything like that.
By the same token, I mean, I was rolling into making decisions based off the first thing that came into my head. And I don't think it's giving away, but I think there was a decision of like, do you go your own way? And Fleetwood Mac came into my head immediately, and it's like, well, I've got to make that. And the decision was just purely made on the fact that Fleetwood Mac was now stuck in my head, and that was the decision I was going to make.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. There's loads of replayability to it, 100%. We'll definitely go back and play some more of it at some point.
I'd like to play it with the girls.
Yeah, so would I. Be interesting. Yeah, no, it's really fascinating. The cards are exceptionally well written, like the actual authorship of the cards is great. Like there's how do I put it? There's a real kind of emotional weight to the cards. And I wouldn't necessarily say it's like one of those games that is purely kind of emotion based and just kind of gets really heavy and bleak and sad.
Yeah.
And there's enough action in it to kind of keep people who are interested in that time period and are used to war games entertained and interested.
Yes.
But it's got this lovely balance. It reminds me in tone very much of Grizzled, where it's kind of like the emotional impact of war and how horrible it is and personal relationships, while still being quite an entertaining and impactful game. And I like the fact that it gave a very balanced view on the war in that sense as well. So the fact that and again, no spoilers here, but not all the French kind of people you meet are good.
Yeah.
Not all the Germans you meet are bad.
Yeah.
Like, the fact is a lot of these people are just thrown into this horrible situation. And it's very much like, I'm saying about GCSEs, I think back to like A-level sociology. You got like kind of top down and bottom up and stuff in terms of societies. And this is very much like bottom up. You're looking at like the individual people and what kind of village they're living in, not kind of looking at the big weight of the war on a global scale. It's a really kind of intimate, small scale kind of thing.
I also liked that the not every card flip was necessarily like, it didn't feel too linear, As in, I had to turn over every card to like, and it was go. You would go off in different directions, and sometimes it would just be a little bit of backstory, just a little bit of narrative, and that may come up again later in the game. So I'm just thinking, visiting the graveyard. I don't think that's spoiling necessarily anything, but that just felt like a sort of nice bit of backstory to the character. So it wasn't all about just, oh, you have to go here and complete this mission, or you have to go here and make this decision. Sometimes you make a decision to go somewhere, and it's just a nice, well-written bit of backstory that sort of helps fill the holes in this character that you're kind of playing.
Yeah, and I mean, we definitely missed loads and could have done stuff in different orders, which would have affected outcomes.
Yes.
We took certain choices where we could have taken others. There was loads of stuff we could go back and play again, which is interesting. And I don't think it's necessarily, like you said, just going to be a linear retrace our steps up to a certain point. With that said, there is some interesting stuff as well you can do on the map. So the map kind of gradually changes over time. And there's certain elements of that I won't go into at all in that sense, just again to avoid spoilers. But one system in the game that seemed very cool was it seemed to be, and again, we don't know this kind of for sure yet, that there's almost like a kind of, I suppose, allegiance system that seemed to be developing a bit on the map. So between kind of like resistance and, sort of bad things and all this sort of stuff. And we picked up a couple of cards where I think the outcome was very much determined on what we had in terms of resistance versus the horror stuff.
Yes.
At any point. So it did seem there was a certain kind of swing system on the map as well based on your choices.
Yeah.
So you were starting to get a visual measure of your progress and how things were kind of panning out.
Yes.
So it'd be cool because we didn't really necessarily see how much all of that kind of affected stuff. It'd be cool to go back and see that more as well and how it does affect things.
Yeah. Is it worth mentioning was the bit you were avoiding the legacy type part towards?
Yeah,
okay, fine. Yeah, so it's going to be interesting to play the second time round, even third, fourth. It has, I think, a good amount of replayability. And it'll also be nice to not necessarily play them as much as I want to, but play it again soon. It might be nice to try and forget as much as possible by the next time we play it. So we don't even if maybe we do it uninstinctively, but I don't want to just retrace my steps. Not that I think that's an easy thing to do anyway. You can go off in so many different directions, can't you?
But you also don't want bias, do you?
No.
You don't want, like, for example, where you and I made that really good decision on that twisty bit. Like, if we play it with Jazz and Jodie, we don't want to just shoehorn them to do that just because we know it's the right
I was about to say that
answer.
That would be, that for me, that'd be the cool part about playing it, you and I, and now we introduce somebody and maybe let them, and try not to bias them on some decisions and let them make a decision and see how it plays through, but still then partake in some decisions that we haven't done before.
It would be a lovely solo game. It would be, and I know they're pretty much designed for that. That would be so nice to like sit down and play for like a morning.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, because it's basically reading a book, but then it's sort of panning out in front of you. It's a really cool idea.
Yeah.
And I should say, Cartaventura, from what I've seen, also seems to be quite an expansive series now. And I know that from the little bit of research I've done, they seem to be based around certain historical figures or at very least locations, time periods. And in the box we got, the Cartaventura D-Day one, there's a little pamphlet that talks about prominent historical figures kind of around the French resistance and Normandy and that sort of stuff in that time period. And it said at the top, don't read this until you've played it once.
Okay.
So I've not read it yet, but it looked cool. And it shows that the people have kind of done some research and looked into it. And I think it's just this lovely idea of these little kind of choose your own adventure, small box games that aren't very expensive in different time places, focusing on different historical figures who may have been overlooked. spoke to you when we played it the other day. Like, I think one's based around kind of Everest. There's another one that seems
Everest
to be in the desert. Like, they look really cool, dude. I'd really like to kind of get into them.
I mean, I might shoot myself in the foot here by saying this if they end up listening to the podcast, but it would be a nice gift to give to. I'm thinking this is like a perfect little gift game to give to somebody. And the Everest one that springs to mind would be great for Smithy.
Yeah.
I think she would absolutely love this game, and that theme for her. So Smithy went to base camp, and I just think that theme for her would be really, really cool. And I think this is like a perfect game gift to give to somebody.
Yeah, she, like Everest and reading.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Basically, that's actually a really good point. If you know someone who really likes books and is kind of little bit into board games, but not that experienced, doesn't necessarily know that much about them, this would be great.
Yeah, agree.
I'd get this for my mum.
Yes.
Easy.
Yeah,
Easy.
I would. And it's one of those that I've talked previously in other episodes about people coming over for a game evening and then me handing them a game. This is like a perfect game that I know this goes against like sort of selling. You want to sell the game, but if I was trying to get somebody into board games, I could potentially play a run through of this with somebody. If they enjoyed it, I'd easily hand the copy over to them and say, "Go play this a couple of times, with your friends."
Yeah, and I think just to kind of add as well, something that I was really impressed by was this was sent to us for free by Hatchet Board Games UK, and they've been very kind to us. The temptation was very much to kind of like, well, we say it's amazing to not upset them, or vice versa, kind of be like, well, oh no, I need to be really worried about not being biased and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
What I found really interesting was when we first opened it up and we started those first couple of cards, I was a bit like, I'm not 100% sure because Andy's just watched me read some cards.
Yeah.
But then once that map started coming out,
yes,
I was like, oh, this is... And then by kind of midway through, you and I were like, this is amazing. This is really cool.
And this is genuine excitement, emotion being drawn into this. And I guess that's because that's also personal. That's the kind of people we are. We like to get brought in by lore. Certainly you. I mean, you love Warhammer lore. You get into the lore of things quite a lot. And I started doing that and enjoying it more and more. Well, as we've been quite positive about it, and it is genuinely positive, I do want to point out one or two negatives that I think the game has. The first one being that, okay, there's two things. There's one, the number of playthroughs is a bit of a negative. It does have a limited shelf life. As in, once you've played all 5 endings, and you might push it a little bit more than that just to sort of explore different paths to those endings, it has a bit of a shelf life. So that is one negative, but you can turn that into a positive. Like I say, you can hand it off to people then as a gift and get them into it. And the other ones are not that expensive. The other negative to me is the pandemic. I'll call it the pandemic effect. The pandemic is when you play a co-op game together. You can not let people make their own decisions. You can be like too forceful with people, I think, and I don't think that's necessarily a problem of the game itself. It's just a problem with the mechanic of having to make a decision and working cooperatively. Yeah, so it's an interesting one, that. So I agree with you, but I also don't. I'm kind of yes and no from my perspective, because I feel on the one hand, the 5 endings, well, I mean, the argument is it's effectively a choose your own adventure story. Most books only have one ending, and people I know still reread books. Good point.
Films generally, most of them only have one ending,
and they rewatch. I mean, I rewatch films.
Yeah, video games can have multiple endings, but I still know people who will replay games even after they've got all of them.
That's fair.
And then in terms of the, I know you use the phrase like pandemic effect, but like the alpha gamer kind of thing, where someone's kind of shouting other people down and leading the way and going, no, that's wrong, and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. I think it's difficult because on the one hand, that kind of really depends on your gaming group.
Yeah.
It also kind of really is a case, though, of like, it does add something to the game because those decisions were difficult and you need people to kind of argue and be like, no, we shouldn't do that. That's ridiculous, kind of thing. So I think that's less a criticism directed at Cartaventura D-Day and more one at kind of co-op decision-based games in general.
Yeah.
And that really does just come down to people's gaming groups. Because let's be honest, if that were us, and I was getting all red in the face and shouting at everyone and going, no, you're all idiots because this is what we should be doing. Then everyone's just going to be like, shut up, Josh.
Yeah, you're
sit
right.
Down.
You shut up and sit down.
Please sponsor us.
I think you're right. It's just me looking for a negativity, something negative. It isn't the game's fault. It's more about the mechanic and, as you say, the people that you play board games with. I'm struggling to find a negative thing about it at the moment. It needs a bit more. It needs more play.
I think to a certain degree, the only criticisms I feel are obviously it's choose your own adventure thing. I did feel some of it was very dense text heavy, which I was happy with and was fine with.
Yeah,
but I do feel younger players might just struggle with that a little bit more,
unless they're really into reading and.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's quite kind of rude of me in a way. I don't mean to kind of generalize, but I mean, there was a word in there the other day, like, I taught quite complex literacy-based courses for 6 years, and there was a word in that I'd never even heard of the other day. And I was like, well, maybe particularly younger people.
Yes, I don't know what the age group suggestion is for this.
I can't remember on the box. I mean, as long as they have an adult with them kind of like maybe taking over most of the kind of stuff as well, or sharing it out equally, then that'd be all right. And I suppose the other thing was just maybe the lack of direction. Like I liked the fact that it didn't have a rule book, but part of me at that point where we got a bit stuck and confused and we'd done something wrong, we were just totally on our own and had to backtrack through a big pile of cards. And I don't know about you, I ended up with a really bad headache after that.
Because I was could see on your face.
I was just digging through those cards, reading them constantly, trying to find where we'd gone wrong.
Yeah.
And in the end, it was all fine. But just some sort of guide to like a quick reset would be helpful, I think, just in case someone does it. Well, hopefully no one's as stupid as we are. That's
more the point. And maybe we can write a guide ourselves and put it on on our Instagram or website or something. I think, I don't think I've got anything more to add. If I know that we talked about not necessarily scoring any games that we review or anything like that, but from my perspective, it certainly gets the Little Bear high pool, shall we say. It's one I'm gonna play again.
Yeah, I agree. Like you asked me the other day, we're doing this review, what do you want to do about scoring? And I'm not a big lover of the scoring kind of thing, because I always think it's a bit loose as well. I genuinely don't know if any ball game I've ever played has truly been a 10 out of 10.
No.
And likewise, I don't think one's ever been like a 1 or a 0 out of 10.
And likewise, to add to that, I've never watched. I watch many a YouTube channel, and it's playthroughs of a game that tend to get me into it, not because somebody turns around and says to me, this is in my top 10, so I really recommend you play this. I have to watch a game and or feel the experience of the game to really be sold to it. So this is just really mine and Josh's opinion of the game. I have to say that we absolutely love it. If you like any of the games that we've told you that we enjoy very much before, then it might be a game that you might also enjoy if the type of games that we like line up, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it does, definitely. And I mean, as you've kind of alluded to, I'd definitely give it the high pour as well.
Yeah.
I think it's an excellent game. It's beautifully written. It's inexpensive. It's great value for money. And it's really good, engaging, immersive fun with good replay value.
Yes.
I mean, I think it's absolutely brilliant. And I'd 100% play it again. And thank you so much, Hatchet, for sending it to us.
And very much look forward to playing the other games that you sent us. I mean, you've raised with this guy. We chose this one randomly to play first. But the bar's been set quite high in terms of the games that you've sent us. So I'm hoping the other two hold their own as well. Not that we will necessarily compare them to this, but I just feel like the bar's been set. It's like Hatchet Games, you've pulled it out of the bag. This is a cracking game. So
yeah, absolutely. Anything you want to add? Just kind of round off, Andy.
The only thing I would add is it would be good to hear from listeners on what they thought our review style was like. We kind of keep it casual. We like that approach. It's kind of fun for us to keep it that way. If you'd like something a bit more research based, if you want to know who the publisher is every time and how many players it plays. I mean, this game took us about an hour to play. Thereabouts. If that's the sort of thing that you want, let us know. It's stuff that we can throw in if you want it. But also, likewise, if you like our casual approach, please let us know.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Andy. Actually, yeah, and please do message us or write into us about that at Mail@Bear Games or Instagram or Discord or on Spotify, what have you.
Patreon also.
Patreon. Yeah, because that would be useful. I think we've generally gone from our own experiences, haven't we? Which is, beyond can I play this 2 players so I can play it with Jazz or Jody respectively or solo. Player size, time, that sort of stuff never really bothers me that much. It tends to be more like theme gameplay and just a general gist of what it's like. I think maybe podcast-wise, that's a little bit easier to kind of stay on track with because you can almost dip in and out of it slightly. But yeah, no, I think it's
feedback.
good to...
just some feedback would be nice.
Yeah, definitely. Right, with that said then, I've been Josh.
I've been Andy.
Take care, everyone.
Before you leave, you must know you are beloved. Before you leave, remember I